Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it may be for you. This is Johnston coming at you again. Another video. Last video I spoke on interracial relationships and why black people, instead of running away from each other, we should be running toward each other. How every other people in the history of the world that has been successful achieved success by uniting amongst their own people. People unite around race, they unite around religion, they unite around political agendas. For black folk in the United States, I'll just say this and then we'll move on. Anytime that you are dying in large numbers, like we are, anytime you're being incarcerated in large numbers, like we are. We have more black people in prison than any other nation in the world, anywhere in the world, at any time in the world. This is our challenge. Our challenge is what it always has been. Freedom and justice. And to achieve this, we must have land. But today, I'm going to talk about something that I've been getting asked a lot of questions about. Why, after the first allegedly African American president served 2 terms, talking about Barack Obama, are black people further behind than they've ever been? Why, after the reign of Barack Obama, we fell further behind in every measure of success imaginable? Home ownership, which is the center of black wealth. We don't have many investments. We don't own big corporations or companies. Never have been given that opportunity. But we did buy homes. Home ownership amongst black people in the United States during the reign of President Obama fell by 25%. White unemployment was cut in half. Black unemployment rose by 40%. And the deaths at the hand of law enforcement continued without our president effectively or vigorously challenging any of these things. Even venture capital, small business loans, we received almost half as much under President Obama as we did under the presidents that preceded him. And I contend the reason for this is Barack Obama was not an African American. He was not the first African American president. He was an Irish American by lineage, legacy, and history. Now, the first African American president was a Central American African American president. In fact, he was the second president of Mexico. His name was Vicente Guerrero. He was elected, came to office in 1829. The first thing President Guerrero did was he abolished slavery in Mexico. Now, doesn't it stand to reason if when an African American president came into power in the United States, the first thing he would have did was abolish the enslavement of black people in America, and he would have given us economic inclusion. Okay. Now, understand this. There's no real freedom without economic freedom to go along with it. That's the reason why at the end of the Civil War, there were 4 million black people in the United States enslaved. Over 1 million died almost immediately because they were murdered or starved to death. That's because we were just let go without any economic freedom. There was no concern for us by the government whatsoever. In 1865, in Louisiana alone, there were 2,000 lynchings, burnings, and killings of African Americans. Now, the reason why I said Barack Obama was just another Irish American president is this. His lineage and his legacy and his privilege came from his white side of the family. If he wouldn't have been an Irish American, he would have never became president. If he'd have been an African American president, he would not have governed without due consideration for African people. If there was any slavery in Barack Obama's lineage, it was through his mother, his white mother's side of the family. Same place the privilege came from. And one thing Barack Obama could have did, and he should have did, and I'm going to give you at least 7 things that Barack Obama should have did, and he would have done if he would have had African American people on his mind. The first thing he would have done, he would have pointed out that I have nothing in common with African American people. If I did, I wouldn't have made it to the presidency. By lineage and legacy, I'm an Irish American, and nothing exemplifies that more, and no one has ever been better situated to illustrate how we have been victimized because of the color of our skin in the United States. Now take this. Between 1640 and 1660, Oliver Cromwell, Lord Protector of Great Britain, brought at least 200,000 slaves, white slaves, from Ireland. They thought so little of these white slaves that Cromwell brought from Ireland. Cromwell was a general in the English army at the time. Later on in 1649, during the Reformation, he cut off the head of King Charles and became Lord Protector of England. But he made his bones killing and enslaving the Irish. These are Barack Obama's real and true ancestors. Now, to show you what it means to be black in this country, how we've never been given a chance to get ahead, take this. All right, they thought so little of these Irish people that they brought from Ireland that first they took the men, they brought them over, just like they did in Africa. 8 out of 9 people enslaved that came to the Western Hemisphere from Africa were young men between the ages of 15 and 25. So they took the men from Ireland, brought them to the United States, enslaved them. Then they went back and said, we're going to get the women and the children. And they brought them. Most of them, men and women, went to the West Indies. But a considerable number of them were brought to the United States. The going rate for one of Barack Obama's Irish ancestors would have been 10 pounds sterling. The going rate for an African slave was 50 pounds sterling. If that wasn't bad enough, they decided, since there was an overabundance of male black slaves in the United States, they were going to give these Irish women to the male black slaves as wives, concubines. Okay. Now, this went on until there were laws passed to stop this, because a girl child of this union was highly valued because she looked exotic and beautiful. They thought that race mix combination was the thing, and you could get £1,000 for her. All right. Now, this was between 1640 and 1660. And to show you something about the difference between whites and blacks in the United States, now you have the ancestor of a white slave who is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. His name was Roger B. Taney. A case came before Taney, which was the most infamous case involving slavery in the history of the United States. It was the Dred Scott decision of 1857. Taney's people in 200 years had overcome the experience of slavery because they were white, and they had advanced themselves to now this Irish great-great-grandson of an Irish slave woman was able to do the most hurtful thing ever done by a single man to black people in the United States. In the Dred Scott decision, he ruled that black people were not human beings. As such, we were property, and we had no rights that whites were obligated to respect. But as property, this had to do with the fugitive slave law. Even if a black person, man, woman, child, didn't matter, if they escaped a slave state and made it to a northern state, they still were the property of whoever held the bill of sale for him in that slave state. Plus, he opened up the West for slavery by changing the rules of what was called the Missouri Compromise, which inhibited slavery in the western United States. Okay. He made every white person in the country, and Indians included, legalized, obligated slave catchers to run down black people, put them in chains, and send them back into slavery. This law that he passed was so discriminatory. It even said that if a case came before a magistrate or a judge or a black person, because they would grab free black people who was legally free, they'd grab them too, and say, you challenge it in court, you're free, I'm not a slave, I'm not owned by anyone, here's my birth certificate. You remember Trump was asking Obama for his birth certificate. Here's my birth certificate, here's my papers, and so on and so forth. I'm free. Well, if the magistrate or judge ruled against the black person, he got $10. If he ruled in favor of black people, he only got $5. Plus, law enforcement, you ever be out somewhere and you feel like, white people are helping the police watch you in a store or something? Well, they said that if any law enforcement officer said to a citizen, hey, this is a slave, help me grab hold to him, catch him. They ran away, they've escaped, I want to take them back to slavery. They had to help capture the black person in question. Now, the next thing that an Irish person or an Irish official did to black people, and these were the three men in the history of the United States that did the most hurtful things to black people, were first this Roger B. Taney, an Irishman. The second one was Andrew Johnston, who was president after Abraham Lincoln's assassination. Andrew Johnston, he was a virulent racist. but he hated the Southern planters. He was the only senator that refused to abdicate his seat in the U.S. Senate, only Southern senator, when the Civil War broke out. So he became Abraham Lincoln's vice president. And the reason why he didn't abdicate his seat is because at one time he had been rented out as an indentured servant to a planter, a Southern planter, and he was whipped just like he whipped any slave. So for that reason, he hated the Southern planters. But he was a poor, rural, white person who, even more than the Southern planters, he hated black people, because he knew that if black people weren't forced back into those cotton fields, cane fields, tobacco fields, rice fields, that was going to be what poor whites like him and his people would have to do. So what he did was he pardoned a bunch of the Southern planters. He was pardoning over 100 of them a day in land that had been given to free black people. I don't know why the government did this. Couldn't see what was going to happen. It was the land that had been once occupied by whites before the Civil War. So he gave it back to them. And when he gave it back to them, of course, black people ran off that land and left with nothing. He vetoed every civil rights bill, anti-lynching bill, anti-Klan bill that came before him. He missed being impeached by one vote. When everybody in the nation was for giving black people some land, giving them the tools to work the land with, giving them some seed money, Johnston struck it down, and essentially he sicked the Ku Klux Klan on. Okay. The only person in history that did more to harm black people than Taney and Johnston was William Jefferson Clinton. Now Barack Obama, he was the creation of the Clintons. And believe it or not, Bill Clinton is not the brains behind that outfit. Hillary Clinton. Bill is a philanderer who can't behave, running around exposing himself, doing crazy things in the Oval Office with interns up underneath his desk. And when they send him out on the campaign trail, he can't even stay on message. That's why he put his foot in his mouth in South Carolina. And as recently as this past election, he couldn't resist to say something good and stupid about 13-year-olds hopped up on crack, running around killing you. That's why killing black folks in their own neighborhood. That's why he instituted the war on crime. Lie, lie, lie. And see, Barack Obama, he knew that the Clintons were lying, and he didn't speak up. If he'd have been the first African-American president, he wouldn't have let the president who put more black people in jail than any president in American history, who made it so oppressive for black people that in the United States we're 8 times more likely to be stopped by the police, 20 times more likely to be in prison than in any other country in the world. Any average citizen of any other country in the world, we're 22 times more likely to be in prison in the United States because of the Clintons. And this crack versus powder cocaine disparity in sentencing, he dodged that issue, refused to give any relief. And Barack Obama, he didn't do much better. He didn't speak out when he should have been stood up like Vicente Guerrero did and said, look, you're going to stop this madness. I don't even deserve to be president if I can't tell the truth about this one. So let me read something to you right quick. And what I'm going to read to you is the New Deal for Black America. This is Trump's plan for Black America. And I'm not a Trump fan, but I want to illustrate something. Even a guy like Donald Trump has something that he offers black people for their vote. Barack Obama, we got symbolism and nothing else. Empty symbolism and a whole lot of rosary rhetoric which meant nothing. That's the reason why Hillary Clinton didn't get elected. She didn't stand up and say, look, I'm sorry for what my husband and I did to African American people in the United States, and we are going to correct it. There's no reason under God's green earth where 40% of black men should either be in prison or under the jurisdiction of the Board of Probation and Parole. And when you're on probation and parole, and I have a bachelor's of science degree in criminal justice administration as well as political science, and when you're on probation and parole, all that means is you are on deck waiting to go to jail because you have no rights, you lose your rights of due process in the whole nine. So let me read Trump's New Deal for Black America. Okay, number one. This one here is absolute garbage, but I'm going to read it anyway. More law enforcement on the ground. If you're going to put any more law enforcement in the black community, make sure that they're black police, because every people deserves the dignity and the respect of being policed by people who look like them and choosing their own police men. Okay, number two, incentives to get businesses to invest in poor, blighted neighborhoods. That's a good one. This is Trump stuff now. Number three, financial reforms to make it easier for black Americans to get credit for businesses and create jobs in their own communities. Number four, convert assistance programs into micro loans. See, we need venture capital. In order to start a business, you have to be able to borrow money, that's seed money. Everybody else can borrow money and open up businesses in our community, but we can't. And this is a systemic problem. Number five, millions of dollars in infrastructure spending, roads, schools, etc. He put Ben Carson in charge of urban development. And I would hope that Ben Carson would have enough wherewithal to when this money, when these jobs come about, to make sure that there are a representative number of black people on those jobs. No less than 13%, because we're 13% of the population in the United States. And it galls me when I see people building houses for HUD in our community, and you don't see a black person on the crew. I do a lot of traveling. I go up and down roads, and I see all these construction crews, road crews, and I know that work pays $30-some an hour for craftsmen and up to $20 an hour for laborers. But we are representatives. Sometimes I'll count maybe 40, 50 white workers before I can count one black worker. This is wrong. School choice and charter schools, private schools, etc. Okay, well, anytime you hear privatization, school choice, state latitude, and any of those terms, that means middleman. And the middleman, they're going to serve the board of directors and the shareholders, and they're going to get between the government and the money and make a profit, and you're going to be left with worse service for more money than it was before it was chartered, put under school choice, or privatized. So that one there, if they go that route, we should open up our own schools, hire our own teachers to give our own children an Afrocentric education. Not indoctrination, not training, but an education that will prepare them to become functional adults in a white world. Okay, now, funding for historically black colleges and universities. I graduated from one, and we need those research grants that they give to Harvard and all these schools. And I think Trump, he was talking about giving us maybe 5%, and I think Amoroso is 8. I think she said, well, we need at least 7. No, we need at least 13%. That's what percentage of the population that we are. No, we don't have as many schools as whites do, but think how much good that would do if we could get those research and development grants. Because we don't have the alumni support that white schools have. People with money who can make endowments to our schools and donations and so on and so forth. Okay, vocational training. Everybody is not cut off for college, but there are technical fields that are opening up in robotics and miniaturization that we need to be able to master those skills and take those jobs. More than anything, we need businesses. But if you're going to go to work, then it's nothing wrong with having an education and a marketable skill. It still has its place, but there's nothing like owning a business if you're going to create wealth. They got protection of liberty, religious liberties, and protection of the family. Well, this new tax plan, he's got cutting taxes for married couples and increasing taxes on single mothers to the point where they get single people get lower tax returns, 1/2 to 1/4 of what they've been getting. That's not protecting families. Along with trade and immigration reform. That immigration reform is a big one, because there's no way that people like us who have been in this country for 20 to 22 generations. A generation is usually measured in somewhere around 25 years. And if you do the math, the average black, not the average black person, but over 90% of black people in the United States have been here 20 to 22 generations. Hispanics, and they start coming here in large numbers in the 80s, and they have 1-2 generations at most, and there's no way that they should be allowed to supersede us. And Barack Obama, he never spoke out on that. Now, I would read Barack Obama's plan for advancing Black America and helping black people in the United States, but it's non-existent. You know, Irish American president forgot about black people. Now, what I'm going to do is, this is what a plan for Black America from any president should look like. I'm going to read my version. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, 1. Barack Obama should have had an honest conversation about the damage America has done to our people and challenged the government to make a sincere effort to undo that damage. I think that's self-explanatory. Number 2, initiate government loans specifically for black people to open businesses in the black community. Remember, Trump had that in his plan. End slavery in America once and for all by initiating and refusing to back down on a constitutional amendment that would outlaw prisons for profit by making a profit on any person or in prison in the United States. Persons, institutions, or public or private, to earn 1 dime from imprisonment of an American should be illegal. Now, you go back to when slavery was ended, and they stuck us in those prisons during the Jim Crow era. We rebuilt the infrastructure of the South for free. And every state in the United States earned several $1,000,000 every year off of black convict labor. And there are people today, prisons for profit, it's a $7-8 billion annual market of misery on the enslavement and imprisonment of black people who routinely, and this is, we go to court and we get twice as much time as a white American for the same crime. And people are making money off our misery and our imprisonment and our enslavement. And slavery is real today in the United States for black people. I was a slave held in a prison for profit institution for juveniles, and I never committed a crime, never been charged with a crime, never convicted of a crime, and worked just like a slave for most of my teen years. And I'm going to speak on that at a later date. Now, number 3 of my plan was ban immigration into America until every American willing and able to work was employed. That's obvious. You got people coming here. See, the reason why they opened those borders up in the 80s, Ronald Reagan did it. Around the same time he broke the air traffickers control union and started downward spiral of unions to now less than 8% of the workers in America are represented by unions. Well, when he opened up the borders, he did it to bring in an alternative source of cheap, docile labor, people that had no rights, they couldn't complain, they could treat them anyway and pay them any way they felt. And it hurt people of modest means, anybody that worked with their hands, whether they're black or white. This was a blow to them, and a blow that has been hitting us over and over again, and we've never recovered, black or white, in the lower echelon of the middle class. And in as much as black people are disproportionately poor, it hurt us more than anybody. So illegal immigration is responsible for 20% of the depression of wages, 25% of the unemployment, and 10% of the prison population of African Americans and poor white people in the United States. Need to stop this madness. Send them folks back home because they have a country to go to. You're not breaking up their homes. They can take the children with them. That's the advantage they have. They have a country to go back to. Another advantage they have is drug money. These sanctuary cities, you know, this is something I've seen up close and personal. You know, people that you never expect, people who seem to be going about their everyday life, they are duplicit in the distribution of drugs out of these sanctuary cities. These sanctuary cities are nothing but forts, outposts for drugs being dealt from Mexico by Mexican cartels into the United States, and they're distribution centers for drugs. And until the United States develops a no tolerance, no exception policy on deportation of people who are in this country illegally, I'm not talking about waiting for someone to commit a crime and none of that. If they're in here illegally, they don't have paperwork, send them back home. Number 4, sponsor and support legislation in Congress that would reserve enough land in the U.S. for people of African descent to have farming communities large enough to grow enough food and to raise enough livestock to clothe our people, and to provide enough government loans and farming subsidies to accomplish this. Number 5, to demand and refuse to back down that it is a violation of the constitutional rights to free speech for the government not to make sure that black people have complete ownership and control of at least 3 national cable TV stations and 3 radio stations that broadcast from coast to coast in every corner of the nation. And if private enterprise did not provide the advertising revenue to support this, the government would. Okay, on this last one, the government has a huge budget for advertising. The president has several $trillion of money that is in his budget for discretionary spending. Much of that is for advertising. You see the ads, be all you can be and all the rest of that. If the government wanted to, they could give black people a voice. And right now, at this point in time, it would be in the best interest, especially of the Trump administration, to see that black people get radio stations and television stations so we can communicate with our people and quit this oppression of black people, trying to restrict our voters' rights. You know, they know good and damn well no black people are out there forging IDs and running all over the place from state to state trying to vote 2 or 3 times. That is these illegal aliens, because you go to any sanctuary city and you can buy fake ID. And they take that fake ID and they're up there voting in dead people's names. And I don't doubt Trump when he says there were 3 million votes cast illegally in this past election, but I bet you not one of them was cast by a black person. All right. Now, what's this other one I had? About the land. And I'm going to say this and then I'm going to close. In 1865, when we were turned loose, kicked out, evicted from those plantations with nowhere to go and nothing to eat and no land, Abraham Lincoln sent his Secretary of War to meet with a group of black clergymen that were considered leaders in the community in a place called St. Catherine Island. It's one of the sea islands off the coast of South Carolina. And he asked these representatives of the black freedmen, what would you like the government to do? What do you need? And we didn't even ask for reparations. You know, $250 trillion of free labor extracted from us at gunpoint over 246 years. We didn't even ask for a penny. You know what we asked for? You know what our representatives asked for? Land. They understood then that black people needed a place of their own. We should have the option of living somewhere free of oppression, free of white supremacy, free of interference, a place where only black people can go and buy homes, and for God's sakes, no one else can open up a business there, and no one else should be able to govern there or police there. So that's all we had asked for way back then. Some land, some tools to work the land with, and some seed, and enough that we could support ourselves and have a little left over to sell and advance ourselves. All right, well, my time is just about up for this video. I try to keep them under 40 minutes, but my name is Cornell Johnston. Please subscribe and hit that bell so you get notifications anytime I post a video. And I'll be posting some more videos soon, because there's a lot going on. Donald Trump is in danger of getting impeached or declared insane and unsuited for the presidency. And don't celebrate, because if they kick him out of there, Pence is probably even worse. And at least Trump will take a stand on immigration, and that's something that is really hurting us now. People coming in and depressing our wages and taking our jobs. And so I'm gonna let you go, and look for me on YouTube. In about a week or so, I'm gonna put another video out. Thank you for listening.